Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is scaling your SMB freight brokerage with my friend Sean Smith. How's it going, Sean?
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
That is cool. I'm excited to talk to you about this topic. Sean, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Definitely. I'm Sean Smith. I'm the VP of Product at Denim. Denim is a tech-forward freight broker and fleet factoring company. I live just outside of Boston with my wife, 2 kids, and 2 Greyhound retired race dogs.
Ooh, those are big dogs.
They are.
So, Sean, what does Denim do?
Yeah, so Denim works with freight brokers and fleets, typically in the SMB category, and we provide...
What is SMB?
Oh, small and medium businesses. And we provide freight factoring and back office solutions like payments, collections, document services, stuff like that for those in the freight logistics space.
Before we hit record, we were talking about our buddy, Kevin Hill, over at Brush Pass Research. And Kevin has created, just in a few short years, maybe it's a year, an enormous amount of data on the freight brokerage business. And I think last year was 30,000 freight brokers. I think we lost 10% of those. And I think we're 27,000 freight brokers. And I think the top 1,100 are well-known names that we would all know. And then I think there's a growth cap, there's a micro cap, and I think you said to me today, a lifestyle cap. And I think the top 1,100, again, the ones that we all recognize, they either have names like we'd all recognize, or they're universal or standard or American, right? But you guys at Denim, your sweet spot is the SMB. So please elaborate on who you serve and what problems you're solving for them.
Yeah, of course. So SMB freight brokers to us is you're moving somewhere between, call it $75,000 a month in freight to call it many millions, but not that many, which still makes you an SM, maybe capital M in SMB. So if you're moving, call it between $75K and $5 million in freight a month, you're right in our sweet spot for SMB freight brokers. So maybe you're an owner by yourself, or maybe you've got a sales team and a person or 2 in your back office. And then we provide working capital. So we help with the float for you to make sure your carriers get paid on time. We provide things like AR, so making sure that you get paid and you're able to manage your sales outstanding. And then we do things like communication and document collection and things like that with your carrier partners so that people get paid when they want to get paid, where they want to get paid, and they have all the documentation along the way. That also doesn't kill your back office. So maybe we'll add that last caveat in too.
Yeah, and we were talking about this idea of scaling an SMB business in general, and it's easier now, and we'll get to how to go about that, but it's easier now, and we're seeing, we'll talk more about this also, is how SMB freight brokers are rising and why they're rising. But it is, in the past, a lot of the tools were too expensive, the money was too expensive. And I think when we talk about the top freight brokers, they are being courted by the largest banks in the world. Hey, let us work with you. Let us give you a line of credit. The SMB freight brokers are not quite there yet, but if they're ever going to get there, they have to scale. And it becomes very much a chicken or the egg thing. And everybody likes to think their area is the most important element of scaling, but money is one of the more important elements of scaling your SMB business.
Especially as a freight broker, because they are providing what is a very expensive float for a relatively small margin across many transactions per month or per year or something like that. And so it's really easy, and we can put easy in quotes, right? But it's really easy to run up a multi-$100,000, $1 million kind of outstanding balance where you've already dispersed funds to your carrier. You're waiting the 30 or 35 or 45 or 60-day clock for your shipper to pay you. And you've got to make payroll, and you have a tonu that you have to pay, or, whatever the situation may be. And so, having a partner there to help is a big part of an unlock for the growth of a brokerage. I know we'll spend quite a bit of time on that too.
In the nature of it, I said this to you before we hit record, The people who start freight brokerages, they probably started somewhere at a freight brokerage, did pretty darn well, made some good money, and realized, I want to do this on my own. I think I have a better way, or I just want to do it on my own and make a little extra money. It's not always started by the ops guys. And that's not to say you don't bring the ops guys along, but it tends to be a very sales forward business. It's sales first. And that's great, except that sales guy doesn't always worry about paying the bills until it's his own business. And he starts to realize, oh my God, these carriers aren't going to work with me anymore if I don't pay them on time. So if it's not a top priority when you start, it quickly becomes one.
And I think we've come across plenty of situations where it's either too late or close to too late. You've really gotten yourself in a sticky situation. And you're right, because there wasn't enough foresight, because the leadership at the brokerage are sales folks and nobody likes the back office. I don't take any offense to that, Joe. It stinks. And that's okay, but let us do it instead of you. That's what I always tell them.
Yeah. And it's funny when I'm a small business owner myself. And it's funny when you go, oh, I made all these sales. And I've had this happen where you go, oh yeah, it was a really good month. Yet I'm broke because no one has paid me. I made the sale, but I didn't get the money. And you're like,
you did the hard part. Just close
yeah,
the loop on the end. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Anyway, Sean, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined Denim.
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in southeastern Massachusetts, some of the old mill towns back there when, the United States used to do a lot of textiles. And then I went to a small engineering school in Boston called Wentworth, where I did computer science, something else. And I realized that being a software developer wasn't for me. So I jumped into consulting and I spent a bunch of time at those really big banks that are making loans and trying to run profitable, digital, healthy financial services companies. But that wasn't for me. And so I made my way into startups. Prior to Denim, I spent time at a dump truck marketplace. And one of the best parts of the dump truck marketplace that we had figured out along the way was the payments. And so we were providing some kind of delayed payments for those contractors and quarry operators who want to hire dump trucks, and faster payments for the owner ops that are hauling your material for you. And that was awesome. And the market responded really well, scaled across the country. I think we were in 60 markets by the time I left. And I said, that was really great. This money problem was really resonating well with our market. So why don't I just do this for real at a company that does this on purpose instead of, I think we were doing it with a spreadsheet in our kind of QuickBooks. And so I found Denim and I met B and Sean, the two co-founders at Denim, who are brilliant and passionate and very determined and hardworking. And so it's been fantastic getting to know them, and especially getting to know our clients who are big time denim lovers. And so it's been really great to be a part of a team and be a part of a solution in the space that is like so burdensome for so many of our clients.
Yep. And I have interviewed both B. So I know his name was Barath, but everyone calls him B in his family. And so I'll make sure I put a link to that episode in the show notes. I also interviewed Sean Vo, but I think I interviewed him when the company was still called Axle Payments. You guys been around a while. You made the change to Denim. And so I don't know if I still have that. They might have asked me to take it down, but they met in high school. And I think it's such a cool story. I think one of them is parents are from India, one are from Vietnam. And I was like, only in America do you have two guys become best friends in high school, one from Vietnam, one from India, and start what is now a really successful factoring company.
Yeah, their founding story is awesome. And I love Denim because our legal name is Busbot. So the two started the business trying to do I think it was like a marketplace for inner city buses to try and map them together. And so when somebody joins us for the first time and they see their offer letter and it says working at Busbot, you're like, oh, I don't know what that means. But they started the Busbot business. They pivoted dozens of times until they landed on factoring. And then specifically in freight broker factoring, because as 5 years ago, factoring an SMB freight broker wasn't a thing. That just didn't exist. Either you went to a bank because you had multiple hundreds of $1 million in revenue, or you didn't get any money at all. And so trying to create an offering that is safe, secure, solves the problem, uses technology, stuff like that was really what sprung B and Sean to build this business. And so I was pretty early with them, and it's been a ton of fun.
Yeah. And I will also say this, anyone listening to the podcast, I've worked with factoring companies. Even when I worked in my dad's engineering business. We used to factor stuff that came because our customers were paying us slow. And a lot of the factoring companies are not digital natives. They're from a different time and they don't specialize in freight. And so they don't understand our business very well. And so you want to get a partner who is, first off, not going to take advantage of you. Secondly, is a digital native like you guys and also specializes in this business because not everybody does. And there's nothing worse than trying to explain, no, you don't understand how our business works. Right?
No, and factoring started by people who had, like, they were basically private investors who had large sums of money, and they specialized in invoices. Doesn't matter what the invoice was, they really wanted to buy invoices. And so the factoring companies now, and Denim has been as you said, a big part of this is like we built all of our infrastructure, our web applications, our servicing platform, all that from scratch with our team in house. And so we are zipping fast, and we're going to move at your speed, right? And freight moves fast, and we know it.
Yep. Yep. So today's topic is scaling your SMB freight brokerage. That's small and medium business size. So it's not for everybody. So when somebody calls, that probably you're not going to get a call from one of those top 1,200 companies because they don't usually have to factor money. It's the guys who are closer to the bottom. And again, make no mistake, these are really successful businesses. I joke about this. I get so used to talking to people who are saying, oh, 20 million, 50 million, 80 million. Somebody lives down the street from you and they say, oh, we're doing millions of dollars in business every month. You're like, that guy's killing it, but it ain't easy. So I want to talk about how do we go about scaling an SMB business? And you said to me before we hit record that these SMB businesses in the freight brokerage business are growing according to our buddy Kevin Hill. Please elaborate.
Yeah, but so a couple of I triangulated a few different researchers out there. Kevin Hill, of course, being one of them. The folks at Armstrong and Associates, and then the folks at Transportation Topics. And so they release a yearly top 100 freight broker report, and they also release a yearly total market size report, which Kevin obviously plays a big part in. And between those two reports, you'll see that since they started doing the reports in 2019, the outside of the top 100, basically the rest of the market has been growing. And this year, it is the highest that it has ever been in terms of market share for those brokers outside of the top 100.
And why do you think that is?
I think a few things come to mind. So, firstly, you want to get to know your partner, your goods if you're a manufacturer, or your produce, or whatever if you're in agriculture. That is how you make money. That's your lifeblood. And so just throwing it onto any truck and anybody that knocks on my door is not something, or anybody I get a cold call from today is not something that's attractive to everyone. You don't want to be just a number on someone's giant customer list. You want to get to know who you are working with and who's taking care of you. And so for SMB freight brokers, in a lot of ways, that means being able to pick up the phone and talk to the owner and get to know their name, and somebody who has their name on a shingle outside their door, just like you do. And so I think there's a lot of value in getting to know who your partner is exactly, and not being a number, right, on a giant customer list. So I think that's a really big factor. I think we can talk about a couple of the others on how people can do that at scale, but getting to know who you are working with is huge.
Yeah, during COVID, we saw a big run up in freight brokerages. And I believe, that most of us believe, I think, that the reason they popped up is you might be working with a freight broker and it might be one of those top 1,200 and they just say, hey, I can't get you a truck. And they aren't maybe sweating it because you're not one of their big customers. They're going to focus in on their big customers first. And so you end up taking that call from that guy who keeps calling you and sending you emails, and you say, okay, I'm going to talk to that guy who's got the little freight brokerage. But that guy in that little freight brokerage might know that little carrier that no one else knows or have a relationship. So we saw growth. Now, some are leaving the market as we slowed down right now. But, and again, one of the reasons they're leaving is cash flow. They're not leaving because they had a great month. They're leaving because they've had some bad months. But I, at one time, multiple times have said on the podcast that I thought over time we would see fewer freight brokers. And maybe that still happens, but I believe that as the big companies had all this technology that the little ones couldn't keep up with, we're not necessarily seeing that. We're seeing a growth. And I believe it's because if you need to ship something, you're going to work with whoever can get you a truck. And it might be a relationship. It might be service. It might just be the fact that I don't want to be number 10,000 on a customer list. I want to be number 4 in the top 10.
Yeah, that's totally right. And I think you've heard this too, Joe, is the share of freight that is brokered has also been going up. So not only has the share of small brokers growing when it comes to the total freight market, but the total freight market for brokers is also growing. So you're hitting two wins at once.
Yeah, I believe that as soon as the internet came, and it's been around for a while, obviously, I thought the internet would make it really easy for shippers to work directly with carriers. And being the middleman, if you want to call us that, some people take that in a negative way. The middleman has to have value. I used to think that middleman's who's not adding value, he's gone. But what we've seen is the freight brokers are adding value in the middle. They're bringing capacity, they're vetting carriers, they're bringing technology, they're bringing customer success. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they do that you can't call them just a middleman. A middleman is somebody who doesn't add value in the middle. And I joke about it, but it's no joke. When we go to the grocery store and buy some oranges, we never think, damn, I hate this grocery store. I'm going to start buying these oranges directly from the distributor. Or better yet, I'm going to figure out where they grow them so I don't have to. And meanwhile, then the grower says, yeah, I'll send you, how many bushels did you want, Sean?
So I had 5 oranges, Joe.
Right. Yeah. So we're used to working with middlemen. The middlemen aren't going to go away as long as they add value. And they are adding more. In my mind, they're adding more and more value with data and tech and service than ever before.
Yeah, the tech factor is huge, especially call it the last 24 months, maybe. So I think as we all saw the freight demand chart do this over COVID, and everybody got really excited about what a huge market freight is. And a lot of brokers rushed into the market, a lot of carriers rushed into the market. So did a lot of tech companies. And so what has come of that now, a few years later, is that we've got a lot of really interesting tooling, especially in the areas like the back office. And then things like pricing is really interesting. There's a lot of track and trace technology that's really interesting. A lot of the TMS partners are continuing to do really cool things with AI. So the tech that used to only be available to the companies that could hire a chief AI officer or something is now available to an SMB freight broker who frankly can start it up a lot faster. They can click on an ad on Google that they find really interesting and start using a piece of tech tomorrow because it's all in the cloud and it's really easy to spin up, where you used to have to buy server racks and all this other crazy stuff that nobody wanted to be part of when you're using new tech.
Yeah, software as a service and the cloud came almost the same time, and I think they enable each other. For you youngsters, there used to be an on-premise system that you would have, and it was you might have a server at your location.
It's probably some terrible closet. It probably
Yep.
has Christmas decorations in it, maybe too. Yeah.
And to keep that server rolling, and with the software, you would get sent CDs every month, and you would update the software. And the guy who ran that was the most important person in the building, and he knew it. And a lot of them developed that prima donna attitude. And I remember I worked on a CAD system for years, and I always remember thinking, that guy hates everyone who works here, because we would say, could you do this? Could you do that? And he treated like you would show up to him, hey, I got you a donut and coffee. So we had all those on-premise systems. You couldn't necessarily, you couldn't sell it as software as a service. Now we have the cloud and we have software as a service, but the way we are able to purchase is so much different. Now I'm paying a subscription. I'm paying $80, $100 a month, and then scaling from there. And in the past, it was, it's $20,000, and then we'll send you the updates every month for $300 more.
10%. Yeah, 10 or 15% of whatever your upfront cost is. I know.
Yeah, I worked for a software company, and I remember I was a sales engineer, and the sales guy told me one day, he goes, Joe, we really don't care. You just got to get the sale because the money is all in the updates. And what was also crazy is not everyone wanted the updates because they get expensive. And you're like, these updates aren't that significant. And then before you know it, you have a system that's 4 years old that no one else uses on the planet but you.
It was my first internship where I was one of those guys at the office in the closet working on the server, and we had a timesheet program, and everybody would enter in their time for the week on Fridays, and the server would crash every single Friday. So I'd basically sit there and press the reset button so that people could put their time in before the end of the week.
Yep. But now getting back to it, that freight tech is available to everybody. So the biggest companies in the industry, I might have said we spend $100 million on our own transportation management system. The smallest freight broker says, oh yeah, I made an investment in software as a service that is comparable to what they have. And I might have added a green screens or some other solutions that just make, I call those the killer apps that make me better and better. And by the way, some of the, I'll call the big companies that have legacy systems, they can't easily bring in the killer apps. They have to actually integrate the newer softwares that you buy, the new TMS. You can add the killer apps. It's easy. You add the DATs or the whatever, it's easy to integrate. Well, it's not even integration. It's just an API.
Couple of clicks and a key, and you're off to the races.
Right. I say API like I know what I'm talking about. It's just that magic key that connects everything.
Hey, we use Zapier sometimes for some of our stuff, which is like effectively the same thing, right? Where you're just a couple of clicks and a workflow and you're off to the races.
It's no longer labor intensive integrations. It is API connections or Zapier connections that happen in days and weeks, not months. And again, the cost is nominal. So all of a sudden, the smaller players can have a solution that is comparable to somebody 10 times their size.
The capability gap that moat that used to exist between those that spend hundreds of millions of dollars on tech and those that spend a couple $1,000 a month is not as big as it used to be.
So getting back to it, how do we scale our SMB freight brokerage? The first thing is we can get the tech. So people want the service and the relationship that comes with an SMB freight broker, and we can compete with the technology. We're going to be able to have that personal relationship, and we're going to be able to bring the service, but not have to skimp on this tech. So the second thing, and I wrote this down from before we hit record, is developing a niche. Please elaborate.
Yeah, so we spending a lot of time with SMB freight brokers have identified, and I'm sure you're familiar with this too, a pattern where the freight brokers who want to be everything for everyone, was the generalist for all, the master of none, end up in a situation where they are just jumping from customer to customer or from lane to lane or whatever. Whereas those that pick a very specific market, very specific vertical, I'm working with beverages in the southeastern United States with companies of less than 1,000 people, whatever the situation may be, are far more successful when it comes to scaling and growing their brokerage. And so by picking a very narrow market share and being what we call the big fish in the small pond, you're much more likely to develop expertise. You're much more likely to build relationships. You're much more likely to have referrals between customers. So there's a lot of tailwinds that you can get if you work in a very narrow niche. And we're practicing what we preach at Denim, right? We are servicing SMB freight brokers. That is our market. That's who we spend our time with every single week, and we talk to hundreds of them.
Yep. And then to that point is it makes sales a lot easier too when you can develop an expertise. So if I say we got a little freight broker and by whatever chance we have 3 customers that are retail, and we say, you know what, we know some of the problems related to retail logistics. We wrote them down. We made some articles. Maybe we did some podcasts or videos about that. And we put it on our website that this is what we specialize in. And then when it comes time to go to conferences, we say, we go to retail logistics conference. We go to retail conferences. We read the magazines those guys create. We are all about retail. And then if you say, hey, Sean, Joe, you got to make some phone calls today and do some cold outreach. we're going to do cold outreach, email, phone to retail companies. And it's a lot easier when you leave that voicemail that says, hey, we specialize in this. We already work with Target and Walmart and Walgreens. It's a lot easier to talk to somebody who's in that space rather than you go, oh yeah, I'm going to start trying to get industrial customers. And they say something, I don't even know what he's talking about. We know retail.
In what type of freight they move, maybe how often they move it, what sort of treatment it tends to get, what the pickup and drop off coordinations look like. And so all of a sudden, you as you said at the top, right? You are a value add to their logistics function, right? Their supply chain function, and you're not just like a middleman passing the buck somewhere.
Yeah. So if you go to right now, they're a good example, C.H. Robinson, go to their website, you'll see that they have industry verticals. Now, of course, they're a huge company. They started off, I'm pretty sure, I think they did a lot of produce for a long time. So they built this and did really well in that niche. I'm sure they're still doing well in that niche. But they didn't skip around. They got really good at one vertical first. And by the way, I know you worked at some consulting companies earlier in your career. If you go to any of the professional services companies, the Deloitte, PwC, all those companies, you'll look, they have industry experts for every one of the verticals. And in those verticals, they probably have a conference that they host. They certainly have webinars about that. And it's by a market leader. They're writing white papers. They might write books. And sometimes you'll see famous authors who wrote a book and they are partnered with those consulting companies. So when somebody says to one of those companies, do you understand automotive? They say, yeah, we wrote a book about it. We got a white paper about it. We have a conference about it. We got guys who've been doing it year in, year out. That's the kind of professionalism we got to get to. And by the way, you go to the doctor, you can't go to your family doctor and say, hey, can you do a surgery on my foot? He'd say, no, I'm not a surgeon.
Right.
He's a professional. He knows what he does well and he knows what he doesn't do. We have to put that same professionalism forward. Doctors, lawyers, consulting companies, all are professionals and they specialize. We should be the same.
Totally. And you will get to a point, hopefully very soon, if you're an SMB broker listening out there, right, where you feel very well entrenched in your niche and things are working really well for you and you've got a repeatable process and you're working through your sales cycles and you might ask yourself, when do I branch out? When do I do the next one? All of a sudden, you have a beachhead that you can look to and find an adjacency that makes sense. So if you're doing retail, Joe, maybe you work with some importers. And so now you're moving intermodal freight because you've got some retail customers that are bringing things in from offshore. Or maybe you're doing some sort of middle mile work, right? There are a lot of options when you have your beachhead somewhere to go and run similar freight, maybe for similar customers and maybe for adjacent customers, to where the extension of your services makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And by the way, pre-internet, you could say anything to a customer. Oh, we specialize in this. They can't look you up on the internet. Today, much of the sales journey is online. People check out podcasts like this. They check out YouTube channels. They might be considering hiring a new company and they are investigating without any commitment. And so if you don't write articles about that retail logistics niche, if you don't get on podcasts and talk about that retail logistics niche, you're not going to be found. And so the old way of we serve everybody, I am an expert in all freight. When you say you service everybody, more likely you service nobody. That's just the reality. You have to commit. And again, it doesn't mean you say no when somebody says, hey, can you also move a whole bunch of industrial freight for you? Yes. Maybe that's going to be our next niche, but we are not going to lead with that.
That's what they call the pull, Joe. If you get the market pull, maybe you've got to listen. If industrial freight's banging down your door to move their freight, then okay, maybe I won't say no. But
If only it was that easy.
I don't think anybody's knocking on my door to do anything like that, but maybe you do. Good for you.
Yep. Excellent. Excellent. So talking about scaling SMB freight brokerage. And so the first one is just this idea that SMBs are on the rise. And the reason they are is because they're able to provide the service and the relationships that a lot of people are looking for, probably smaller companies, but they also are able to get the best freight tech software as a service, which is making it a lot more affordable. Second, we talked about picking a niche. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is this whole idea of the back office and how that's managed. So please elaborate why that's so important to grow your SMB freight brokerage.
Yeah, we spoke about this a little bit before we started, is that the freight brokerages are not typically started by folks from the back office. They're started by sales folks who do what they do best, which is like making markets and moving freight and making deals. And when it comes to closing the loop on that freight, making sure the carrier gets paid, making sure you collect on that invoice, all of a sudden it's a second or third thought. And you can get your business into a really sticky situation if you don't have your arms around your accounts payable, aka money going out, and your accounts receivable, aka money going in. And we talk with our clients all the time. When they're going through their factoring process, Joe, they're like, "I'm so glad you guys are doing this. I hate this stuff." We're like, "Yeah, that's okay. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. That's why we're here."
Yeah, and you need sales. Obviously, that's the lifeblood of our business. But we need good ops. We need an ops team. And I also need somebody to manage my financial. I'm going to have my internal financial that I might have a partner like Denim. But if I come from a sales background, at some point, I'm going to need somebody to help me with the ops. And then I'm going to need somebody who's going to help me with the customer experience and help me with the financials. And what tends to happen is freight brokerages, as they grow, the guy or the guys or the gal who started it, they are the best salesperson. They're the best at ops, and they're the only ones who seem to care about the bottom line. And it limits their growth at some point. At some point, you say, if I don't develop a team and processes and get systems in place, I'm limited. And I told you this years ago. I wrote, I think I ghost wrote it actually, but it was called Do I own my freight brokerage? Or no, do I serve my freight brokerage? I'll get this right. Does my freight brokerage serve me, or do I serve my freight brokerage? And I think we all know the answer. It ends up being a full-time job and then some. And you can't ever seem to get over. And so even when there's a new opportunity, you almost dread it because you're like, oh my God, I want that extra revenue that'll help us do so much. But I'm going to have to take the lead on the implementation and selling it and closing it. And it's hard to grow beyond a certain point. So if you look at the top companies, obviously they have money to spend on all these
Sure.
back office people, customer support, customer success, and tech and onboarding. The smaller companies, if you don't get it, that you never get to the next level. And again, I've experienced it myself. I'm a small business owner where you go, yeah, if you don't fix some of that back office stuff early, you just got to suffer through and you put in extra hours as a result.
Yeah, you've got to pay the piper at some point, and if you pay it earlier, it's going to hurt less, right? We've seen some of our clients. It really depends on the type of freight that you move and how much overhead that it requires and how much work that goes into it. But like some as small as, call it $200,000 a month in freight, they bring on someone, whether it be on a part-time basis or a full-time basis, to help with their back office. And for others, they're adding a person, call it every $500,000, $800,000, something like that. And so if you're moving, this is all per month. So if you're moving $4 million a month in freight, you've got a small army that you need to be able to pay salary for and all that stuff. So if you can get your arms around a good process, a shared set of responsibilities, you want to make sure that you've got something repeatable. Maybe you've got a staffing source that you can use to bring on folks. There's a lot of ways to be creative here and to make sure that you're not, one, kissing all of your margin goodbye, right, when it comes to payroll time. And two, you're able to scale effectively without needing to put in your Superman cape every single month to be able to make the number.
Yeah. And there are so many companies, freight brokers, big and small right now, who are using outsourcing companies like Lean Solutions Group or Rapido. There's a lot of them out there and they come from our space. So it's not as if they say, we have no idea what freight brokerage is. They might be working with 20 of your competitors and they're not sharing anything. It's lower cost, but I will say that is the beginning of it, that it's lower cost. eventually you're going to find, I think the next 10 years or so, we're going to say that's just where a lot of capability is. That's where a lot of expertise is. And it's not necessarily, you might be attracted to the low cost, but that's not going to be what keeps you there.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this a little later. But one thing that really resonated with me, we had a Denim client advisory board meeting last month, and we talked about staffing, how you think about staffing for the brokerage and what people do and don't do differently. And one of our clients had said, for us, we are able to hire someone far more senior, and we pay them a lot more, and we might have someone part-time or whatever to do some of the rest of the work of running the brokerage with Denim, but we're able to take on someone who can help us strategically guide the financial health of the brokerage and not have to worry about compiling invoices and handling carrier payment issues and stuff like they end up sending our way instead. So like there are ways to get around these sorts of challenges, and you don't have to break your back on it at every turn.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we have in our heads is the work week is 40 hours a week, and you get a job and you work at that job 40 hours a week. And if you're ambitious, you're working 45 or 50 hours a week. And as the world changes, we're working with people who are overseas, and they might be on a different time zone. They might do stuff differently than we are doing, but that'll be fine. I think we're also going to find out that the baby boomers are going to need to stick around. We are short of headcount as we go forward. We're not having as many kids. And those people might say, yeah, I'm willing to hang out and work, and I'd be happy to do it, but I want to do it part-time. I think we're going to also see parents who say, you know what? I have a spouse who has a pretty good job. I'd like to do this part-time, or I'd like to do this 6 months a year. So I think we're going to start seeing people say, is it really 40 hours a week? Is it year round? Maybe not. So I just think we're going to open our minds about that over the next 20 years. And I think it's actually probably going to be necessary, because the baby boomers are a big cohort, and when they retire, and the oldest ones are, I think most of them are past retirement age, and by the way, they're also healthier, so they can hang around a little longer.
Miracles of modern medicine. We have a couple of folks that are in Europe, and when they get up in the morning at hour 4:00, 5:00 in the morning, they're starting their workday. It's quite nice, Joe, to see what we've accomplished for the day before lunch. Like, it's a nice thing to have round the clock, follow the sun service, as they say.
Yep. So we've talked about a few things here. We talked about how we're going to scale that SMB business, freight brokerage. So the first one is these companies are rising. And the reason they're rising is service and relationships, and freight tech is increasingly affordable. Secondly, we suggest pick a niche, do something really well, focus. We talked about third thing, process, systems, teams, partner. Maybe it's an outsourcing partner. It might be some other partners too, necessary. Otherwise, you're gonna squander away all those sales. Last thing we wanted to talk about, and this is obviously something you're pretty good at, is getting a financial partner. Please elaborate.
Yeah. So at the top, we talked about how 5 years ago, if you were a freight broker just starting out and you wanted to get a working capital relationship, it was really hard, if not impossible, to find one because they didn't really exist. And 5 or 10 years ago, if you were a giant freight broker, you would go to a bank and you'd get out accounts receivable, line of credit. And that's what you would use to pay your carrier payables. And there was no in between. So if you're a freight broker now, your options are a little bit different. So with us, with Denim, you can choose to factor with Denim. Denim will invoice your customer on your behalf for you. We will pay your carriers for you directly at the terms that you had agreed to with them, whether it's tomorrow or whether it's 25 days from now, and you can get a rate commensurate with that. And so we'll provide you a bunch of the SaaS tooling that we were talking about included in the cost of the service that we provide you. And when you think about a freight factoring partner for brokers, there are options out there for you. And so I just ask you to be thoughtful about who is in this space that have been doing this for a while, who is in the space who is able to scale for you, who's tech native, who is not. We were laughing before. I saw on one factoring company's website, no hard copies required. I was like, wait, people are actually mailing stuff? I can't believe that's something to brag about. I can't believe people are, that's like a question in this like day and age. And so there's a lot out there for people to choose from if you're a freight broker. So find a financial partner that is flexible for you, whether it be contractually or whether it be how you're priced, whether it's how you want to accept data or information or whatever. Find someone that fits into your tech stack. If I'm using a TMS, I'd like my factoring company to be downstream of that so that I can not have to spend all day going from one system to the other. And then I would also ask you to think about how that partner is going to grow with you as you scale, right? So as you're going from niche to niche, your needs are going to change. And so you need to have a partner that grows with you.
Yep. I will also say I have been a factor in the past, so I know what it's like when you're looking for money and usually you're chasing it after you needed it. Right? You were not saying, I might need money in a month. You're like, I needed money yesterday. And what tends to happen, I know this is, I think everybody's been there in their personal life where you're like, I'm broke. I'm going to open a credit card. And you don't care what the rate is. You need money today. And so what can happen, and there's always going to be some part of this that is predator. And these guys who look and say, yep, we work with desperate people. And there's a lot of that in this.
We can close tomorrow. Sure, no problem at 14%, right? Or whatever the number is.
Yeah. And so the terms matter. And so you might even have a factoring company go, oh, we already have that covered. You might be paying a lot of extra fees. You might be paying because they know there's a certain part of the market that is desperate. And that became, I would almost say, the norm in the factoring space. I don't know if it still is, but not all factoring companies are going to be created equal. You want somebody who you can grow with. And you said partner. You really mean partner, because some are not partners. They'll say, yeah, we're a partner as long as we take about 40% of your margin every month.
Not a very good partner if that's your idea of a partnership.
Yep. I did get a demo of Denim, and I thought it was pretty slick. And bigger companies, if you're at a bigger company, of course you get this, but it was all these reports you get, and it was saying, hey, here's your highest margin customers, here's your lowest margin customers, here's your fastest paying customers, here's your lowest paying customer. Now, again, easy enough to compile, but if you're running a little business, you don't always have the time to get that. But those are just the very basic ones. I saw a whole bunch of different reporting features, and I was like, you guys don't have to create any of that. Your job is to give me money. But I think that is the difference between a transactional relationship and a partner. Partner is actually bringing me something.
The true partnership for us is like being able to unlock growth for you, which unlocks growth for us. So there's a really nice flywheel that comes with helping our clients grow, which means that we grow too. And like Denim is not a bank, so we don't get interest on deposits or anything like that. We're not a freight brokerage, so we're not putting money back into or customer names back into our own brokerage list. That's not how we operate either. Like we are really what do we like to call like the picks and shovels for the miners that are out there finding gold. And so we're playing that role for our clients who are out there trying to hustle freight and make the market.
I like it. Sean, I'm going to summarize that. I'm going to get your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend Sean Smith, and we're talking about scaling your SMB freight brokerage. So we talked about really 4 big areas. First off, SMB stands for small, medium-sized business for freight brokerages. And they are on the rise. They are growing as a percentage of the overall freight brokerage business. And we think that's because they are providing maybe a higher level of service. There's going to be smaller companies who prefer to work with somebody who is maybe comparable size. Maybe they want to talk to the owner. Maybe there's a previous relationship. You tend to get a better relationship with the senior management of those companies. Freight tech is also more affordable. So all of a sudden I could have the technology and the funding solutions that the big guys have. So SMB is growing. And we talked also about the importance of niche. You guys work with a lot of small and medium-sized freight brokers, and the best ones are developing niches rather than scattershot approach. Also, you have to have process and systems. You have to build a team. Usually these companies are founded by sales guys and they are moving fast on the sales front. But if you don't move fast with the people and the systems who make the business work in the background, you're going to suffer. You also might want a business process outsourcing company that you work with. We all need partners, whether it's freight tech partners or fintech partners. It's necessary. Last but not least, we talked about you need a financial partner. I know you know of a good one, and they're not all created equal. Put a big old bow on this one, Sean Smith. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts, I would say, great time to be a freight broker. Great time to be in the market. The tools that are available to you are unlike any ever in history. And the tools tomorrow will be better than they are today because they're changing and growing and adding very quickly. And then the last thing I would say is don't wait till it's too late to get a factory company. Joe, tell people that if they wait until it's too late, they're going to be really sad about it. We're going to be really sad about it. So don't divert funds to not pay your carriers. Don't do any of that crazy stuff that gets you in trouble. Find a partner that can help stabilize you and your business so you can grow without getting into a trap, because it's about the growth. Because the up market is coming, Joe. It's right around the corner. What time is it? It could be today.
You didn't tell me definitively what day the market was going to turn, so please tell me that.
Yeah, second Tuesday of next week. Mark me down. It'll be one.
I'm saying the first quarter of next year, give or take a quarter.
I hope it's before the end of this year. Yeah, I hope it's before the end. I feel every 3 months we talk about this and people say 6 months after that. So I hope it's sooner. I hope it's 3 months. I hope we're right around the corner.
We all do. We all do. So what conferences will we see you and the fine folks from Denim at?
Yeah, so you can find us. We'll be at BitFreighter this year. We're going to go to the Trimble Tech Conference, and then we're going to try and make our way to McLeod too. Yeah, well, you'll be at our booth, Joe, so have people come by and they can get a picture and an autograph.
And I know I saw you guys last year at Manifest and the year before I saw you at Manifest. So that's a little ways off in February, but I'm assuming I'll see you guys out there again this year.
Oh yeah, definitely. We're a big fan of the Manifest group. They do a really great conference every year.
Yep. Well, all these conferences are good. And I always say they just all have a different flavor, different approach, but they all work. What I'll do, Sean, is I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, along with a link to your website and any other links you and your marketing team give me. I'll put those in the show notes so people can reach out and talk to you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me, Joe.
It's my pleasure. It was really great talking to you again.
Awesome.
And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support is very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.